Perfect. So warm welcome to everyone. I know people are in the process of signing on to the session. My name's Carrie Koleski, and I'm your proud host of today's session. I'm a research chair in patient and family-centered care at the Institute for Better Health at Trillium Health Partners, and an associate professor at the Institute of Health Policy Management and Evaluation at the University of Toronto. I'm joined by amazing speakers today, whom I'll introduce when we get to that part of the agenda. But wanted to send a warm welcome to everyone for our session on leaning into the challenges. And we have a few core objectives that we're going to dig into today. We're going to talk about the different sources of conflict and the ways that we might respond to conflict. We use the word conflict sort of interchangeably with tensions and challenges, and it's those inevitable things that we face in our personal lives, in our work lives, in all aspects of life. And so we're going to talk about what are some of those sources of conflict. We're going to talk about how to co-develop some resolutions or dialogue when you have those conflicts. And then we'll look at some decision-making frameworks or like lists of questions rather that you could work through to help guide you when you're reflecting on and addressing tensions that you have. And the reason why we dig into something like leaning into the challenges for this engagement series is that inevitably, as you're working with your teams, your partners, your patient and family partners, facilitators, clinicians, leaders, everyone involved in your engagement work, it's going to be hard. You're going to have those moments when you don't agree. You're going to have moments when you're unsure, and it might be really uncomfortable. And while part of us might want to avoid it and hope that it goes away, those types of challenges are opportunities for growth and opportunities to really dig in and sort of learn together how to understand the challenges and how to go forward. So it's a really exciting session. I hope everyone enjoys it, and I think we'll kick off to the next slide to give you a flavor of what we have. So just a few housekeeping items. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I see people are doing that now. You could also right-click on your video and hit rename, and you can put your organization and your OHT, if you're from an OHT, beside your name so we can see where people are coming from. A reminder that we are recording the session today, so please keep your videos off during the presentation. Otherwise, there is a chance that your video will show up in the recording. And if you do find the chat distracting, because some people like it, some people don't like it, there's a little trick that you could use where you go to at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you click on the chat icon to hide chat from the right side panel. And if you click the little arrow beside the icon, you can unclick show chat previews. So if that sounds gibberish, which it kind of does, you could send a message to Junie or Michelle and they can help you with that. A few little clicks and steps to the next slide. And wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. And specifically, I'm joining you from my neighborhood in East Toronto called Leslieville, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So again, joining you from Toronto, specifically East Toronto, Leslieville. The next slide. And I invite everyone, if you haven't done so yet, to check out our YouTube library. We have 4 recordings in the library now. We have an overview recording on 4 principles of engagement. It's an introduction, and it actually introduces the whole series that we've been delivering monthly. We also have our first session on communication, compassion, and empathy, where we get into how to create comfortable spaces for dialogue and relationship building. We introduce the empathetic communication model from Support House's Center for Innovation and Peer Support. So I invite you to look at that model. It provides guidance on how to have open and authentic communication. We also have our session on bearing witness to lived experience. So providing the tools and the space and the opportunity for people to share, but also for people to receive stories of lived experience in a way that's supportive. And our last session, which was on equity, diversity, and inclusion, which gets into different strategies to consider when you're reaching out to members of your community to participate in your engagement and co-design activities, and things to be mindful of when you're building relationships and ensuring that you do have diverse partners that you're working with around the table. And of course, and now, this is a interlinked series of dialogues that we have. And now we're getting into some of the challenges that we might experience in our next slide. Also drawing your attention to the session workbook, which Michelle emailed out yesterday. The workbook gets into the driving factors of conflict and tension and descriptions of different conflict styles. And I'll do a quick overview of some of those in this theory burst. And there's also some self-reflection questions to support you in responding to conflicts that may arise during your partnership activities, and links to other useful resources to support your learning journey. And please feel free to share this with your partners and the people that you're working with. These are activities that you could do together. You could use some of the materials for some of the steering groups that you might be part of when you're digging into content around how to address tensions and challenges in your work. Next slide. So the session outline for today, we're going to start with a short theory burst. I'll be pulling from some of the content that's in your workbook. And then we'll move into a panel discussion where we're going to work through an actual persona or a vignette of challenges that you might relate to, as people that are working with patient partners, or as patient family partners yourselves working with other stakeholders. And so we'll have some questions related to that vignette with the panel. Then we're going to move into breakout rooms to dig into some of these challenges and to share our experiences. And then we'll get into some group reflections, so some reporting back, and then wrap up questions. So I'm going to get Michelle to launch the first poll, not the one on conflict. We're going to get to that one later, but the poll to see who's in the room. And so we try to expand the answer categories that we have here. So it looks like we have about 40% patient or caregiver partners within an OHT. We have some outside and some who are thinking of becoming involved. We have about a quarter participants who are staff at an OHT or other organization, and a small proportion of clinicians. I'll have to do a better job of reaching out to the research community. I don't see any on yet, but it looks like we have a nice mix of patient caregiver partners and staff and providers and leaders on the call today. We can end the poll. I'm going to click on share results. Not sure if people can see that. Okay, and yeah, so we can move on. Yeah, I can't see the poll or the results. Okay, so we'll have to, if I click share, I don't know if people can see that now. But what I'm going to do, and take a photo. You can see the results. Okay, so some of us could see. Okay, I took a photo so I can send that out afterwards. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So I don't know if there's other fans of Adam Grant out there. I'm a big fan. He's an organizational psychologist, and he has a couple of podcasts. One of them is called Work Life. And he always hits the nail on the head when he talks about, some of the things we can all relate to in our personal life and work life. And he said, leaders often say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And he said, I get why they say that. They want people to be constructive, not to whine or complain. But if people can only speak up when they have a solution, you'll never hear about the biggest problems. which are too complex for one person to solve. And even if they do have a solution, it might be the wrong solution. So what Adam really emphasizes is that first we need to agree on the problem, because we often make assumptions about what the problem is. And then we can have a discussion after that's not very productive because we're actually focusing on different things. So it's so important to align on the problem before you start exploring solutions. And Kenneth Cloak noted, conflict is the arrow pointing to what we need to learn the most. So it's really about opportunities to learn and to grow together. Next slide. So now digging into a little bit of theory. More circle of conflict. And thank you, Rivka Eisenstadt, for pointing us to these really useful resources that you've used in your previous role and your current role at Baycrest. And Moore is a researcher who has studied conflict for many, many years and does a lot of training around the world on helping us understand what are the different types of conflict and the root of conflict. And Moore talks about, many different types, and a lot of these overlap and intersect. So one type of conflict is around relationships, and I pulled that out here because it is a big component of what we focus on in this particular series, but also in the engagement work that we do day to day. So miscommunication, misunderstanding each other, having different assumptions about things. We can also have conflicts around interests. So we have different priorities and preferences for how we should go about things and what we think is important. We could have conflict around structures. So this gets at more of the systemic barriers. So the power differences, access to resources, the ability to be at the tables where the decisions are being made. And so sometimes there's conflict around access to those structural factors. We could have conflict around values, about differences of how we think things should be, how we should go about things, what our personal values are, what are the principles that guide our day-to-day decisions and how we think things should work. And also conflict around data. So this could be the value about different types of data, which could be kind of the quantitative data versus lived experience data, the ability to access the data. There could be conflict around that, as well as the value of the data that we look at. Next slide. And this Thomas and Kilman tool looks at the different ways we might respond to conflict. So they have this continuum for this table, which looks at degrees of cooperation and also the degrees of assertiveness. So for example, you might be competing, you might be trying to win the conflict, say my idea is the best and I know the best. And so that's really assertive, but it's not really cooperative. It's pretty low as you can get on the cooperation scale. Whereas on the other end, if you're looking at collaborating, it is very assertive, but also very cooperative, because you're really looking at how can I understand the needs of others and how can we come together to decide the way forward. And the middle ground is really around compromising, where you're kind of letting go a little bit of what you want to, support what someone else wants. So there's a bit of give and take. So it's kind of mid-range in terms of cooperation and assertiveness. And there's the avoiding altogether. So it's not assertive, but also not very cooperative. Then there's accommodating, which could maybe lead to burnout if you're constantly saying, okay, I'm just going to give up what I need and what I think I want, and I'm just going to kind of whatever, we'll do what you want to do kind of thing. So it's cooperative, but it's also not very assertive. So we're going to launch another poll, and I want everyone to think about a recent conflict or tension that you encountered. It could be anything. It could be something that happened this morning with your partner, with your kids, with work, with a neighbor. And think about, just very quickly, how did you respond to that conflict? Were you kind of in the competing mode, or collaborating, or compromising, avoiding, or accommodating? And I think we should have a poll related to that. Perfect. And I know some of these overlap and intersect, but think about how you initially responded. Okay. We have a pretty good mix here. Okay. And I appreciate, people's honesty here. As much as we'd love to say, oh, yes, we all collaborate. It's hard, right? We might be competing. We might feel strongly about something, compromising, avoiding, accommodating. And there's a pretty even, there's less people that are falling to the avoidance category and competing, but there is a good representation in all of these various categories. And so we can share that now. I don't know if everyone can see it. And there's additional follow-up questions in your workbook, which gets you to reflect further on what do you think were the conditions that sort of prompted you to respond this way, and what is it that you would need to potentially respond differently if you kind of wish you responded differently. So it's really about taking you on a journey on how you responded, maybe how you could have responded, but some of the conditions that got in the way of, or maybe supported you in making that response. So again, that's in the workbook if you wanted to kind of take this work a bit further. So we'll move on to the next. There's a couple more theory burst slides. And we'll stick to this slide for a second, and I'm kind of getting nerdy on you now and talking about getting into the adaptive leadership literature. And this really resonated with me being a researcher in the healthcare system, because there's two types of challenges that Martin Linsky and Ron Heifetz and Martin Linsky talk about in their book on adaptive challenges. There's technical versus adaptive challenges. And technical challenges are sort of straightforward. One person can solve it. There's a checklist. It's tried and true, easy to solve. An adaptive challenge, on the other hand, requires working together differently, understanding each other, multiple people, relationships, discomfort, challenging how we do practice. And so it requires more time, more energy. And what we do sometimes is we apply technical solutions to adaptive challenges instead of adaptive solutions to adaptive challenges. So for example, one example in the healthcare system could be, we have a major shortage of beds in hospitals, and we have capacity issues because of that, and overrun emergency rooms. So a technical response to that adaptive challenge is just add more beds. However, what we haven't thought about is who is going to manage those beds. If we have staff to manage the beds, are they burnt out? Are they supported? Maybe there's waste in the system that we could then take what we're spending on something that's not helpful and putting it towards changing how we practice and support people. So it really gets at flow and moving people through the system in a way that's more supportive and actually gets at the root cause of the shortage of beds. That's a quick example that we might relate to if we use the system or work in the system. So there's technical versus adaptive challenges. And what we really want to do as leaders, all of us as leaders, is think about how can we, as we do engagement work is an adaptive challenge. So on to the next slide, there's a code concept that if we think about, that's how we operationalize being adaptive leaders. So the code concept gets at 4 domains, the first one being character. So owning your mistakes, building trust. So having that learning mindset where you might just owning the fact that you might not have all the answers and you really have to challenge your own assumptions all the time. Organizational justice gets at ensuring open communication. So creating spaces for people to contribute and listen and understand each other. Development is being able to explore new ways of doing things. So really looking at what's working, what's not working, and how can we work together to figure out next steps. And I think someone just put in the chat, bang on, emotional intelligence. So trying to recognize the realities of others. And the emotional intelligence piece is something we dug into in the first session on communication, compassion, and empathy, led by the Support House's Center for Innovation and Peer Support, where they have tons of resources on how to have those open conversations and how to tap into empathy. So if you're looking at how to operationalize being an adaptive leader, here are some core constructs that you can dig into. Next slide. And so again, big thanks to Support House. They have so many great resources that we've been able to build on and use for this session and others. They have some specific questions that you could reflect on when you're facing a challenge. Is first to understand your own perspective. So asking yourself, why do I believe what I do? Get really clear on what you think your key points are before you have that interaction with the person where you dig into the challenge, and ground yourself in knowing that the goal is not to win the debate. So trying to have that open mind. Next slide. And finally, if we're going to link the code concept to these reflective questions, because this slide gets at, once you're now in that interaction with that individual and you're looking at how to resolve, here are some guiding reflections and questions and how it links to the code concept, which is about how to activate being an adaptive leader. Giving the person the benefit of the doubt, identifying and reaching consensus on the problem. So let's not make assumptions. Let's talk about, what do you think the issue is? And I'll talk about what I think the issue is, and see if we can kind of come to some consensus on what the problem is. Sharing goals and perspectives. So listening to the other person's points, asking for elaboration, tell me more, tell me why you feel this way. Figuring out what points do you agree on and where do you have gaps? So are there areas of alignment as a starting place versus things that are a bit divergent? And then looking at, how do you fill those gaps, and how will you know if things are better? And thanking the other person for their insights, and then making a plan to follow up to see if the situation is better. And sometimes you can't resolve the conflict, and that's okay. And we'll get into that when we get into the panel discussion. To the next slide. I think we might be over to the panel now. So I am going to, I'm very excited to introduce this amazing panel that we have today. We have, and I think these individuals will be familiar to many of you. We have Dawn Richards, Dr. Dawn Richards, who lives with rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. And she's the founder of 5-2 Labs Incorporated, and her work combines her analytical chemistry training and her passion to ensure patients inform research in healthcare. So I've always been impressed with the many roles that Dawn has. She helps people and organizations design and execute on their patient engagement initiatives using leading practices and tailoring their approaches to meet their goals and their patient partner needs. And some of her current clients include Clinical Trials Ontario, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis, and the University Health Network. She's written many papers, literature that I've looked to for guidance as well. And she is a volunteer and a VP of the Canadian Arthritis Patient Alliance, and many more things. I'm just clipping through a really impressive bio here. And then Latcha Hives is an advocate and member of the Patient Family Caregiver Council of the Nipissing Wellness Ontario Health Team. She served as co-chair and continues to be actively involved in working groups, councils, and provincial projects to bring the perspective of caregiver and patient to decision-making conversations as we reimagine the healthcare and social services landscape. And currently the tri-chair of the the Nipissing Wellness, I'm from Thunder Bay, so I always say Northwest, Nipissing Wellness OHT Collaboration Council Steering Committee. She brings a long career, a long history of teaching, learning, health and community partnerships, system leadership, etc. And she enjoys contributing to fresh, innovative new ways of being and working with patients and families across the district. So a huge thank you to both of them for joining today, and to Rivka Eisenstadt for helping us with the content for today, and all the way from Tel Aviv. She's back now, but she was joining us in our Zoom meetings as we were preparing all the content, and sent us some really great pieces that we put into our workbooks and into our session today. So now, before we jump into the panel questions, we're actually going to walk you through a 4-part vignette, starting with part 1. So I'm going to get Junie to, oh, here we are. You're already there. I had another slide up. So I'm going to introduce you to Harpreet and Sam. So this is part 1, and we're trying to be fun with our titles, and it's called Not Vibing Well. So something's amiss with collaboration here. So Harpreet is a new member of an OHT working group. It's her first time being part of such a working group, and recently became a caregiver to her mom, And it's really, she's a newbie, she calls herself, to this working group. But then there's Sam. He's another patient partner, more seasoned, and tried to warn Harpreet about the rising tensions within the group. And it's not clear from Sam's perspective how the group plans to move forward on their priorities for the year ahead. So he's feeling frustrated and feeling like the collaboration is breaking down amongst the group. So I'm going to first point this question to Latcha, is what happens when an individual or more individuals in a group are just not vibing well or not collaborating well on the team, and it's creating tension? So from your experience and your insights, what do you suggest happens next?
So thanks so much, Carrie. And thanks to everybody for leaning in today and joining us in this conversation. And so I guess I would say, having been involved as a PFCC member and as a co-chair and now as tri-chair as well, I can speak to how being present and being curious and being observant and an active listener is essential, as this whole culture of partnership and engagement really is evolving and unfolding. I think taking note of any concerns as you notice them, pausing and acknowledging as necessary, and then redirecting to the focused task of the working group is really important, and being responsive and not reactive. And then as we pay attention, we notice where there are gaps or tensions that are arising, like in this situation here. And then we follow up with individuals outside of the larger group conversation. That's important as well. And this gesture itself demonstrates that there is an ongoing effort to create a safe space where people can feel understood and feel their place in this work. And that is evolving, and it can feel uncomfortable too. And it's good to name that. And then with the membership, anticipating supports that could benefit those who are new to the partnership work is really important. And that's an ongoing conversation. So designing onboarding opportunities that can help with developing understandings of responsibilities and expectations for roles can help to prevent contentious situations. So trying to get ahead of it. And it also creates an opportunity to sort of be at arm's length from the person. So we're thinking about the work. And then intentionally seeking PFC members or staff with engagement responsibilities to help with those unhurried conversations. And I can't stress that enough, those unhurried conversations with new recruits that create that safe space again, where they can ask questions and seek clarification of expectations. And I can really speak to this from experience. Prior to having them join an OHT working group or task group, that ensures that the onboarding is really responsive and differentiated for each new member. And it can look very different for each person. And then more specifically, when establishing a working group, having co-created norms, or some people would call them rules of engagement, in place that can be referred to, referenced, revisited at the forefront of any conversation is really important, because that provides consistency in expectations, but it also is an opportunity to acknowledge ownership of those norms of how everyone wants partnership to look, sound, and feel. And then in this case, like Carrie was sharing, if Harpreet declined to meet with Jeanette because she was feeling like Jeanette's schedule was very busy, if that were the situation, clearly messaging out how the unhurried process of meeting with each new recruit is most important, that's not only beneficial to the new member, but it's also important to the person that's doing the onboarding, because it's all about growing those relationships. And then if you're interested in knowing how this links up with the workbook, I would say that it speaks to relationships from section 1 of the workbook. And then at the patient family caregiver council meetings, and you might name your membership differently, but at those meetings, it's important to leave room to speak to challenges, to intentionally revisit processes as well, terms of reference, guiding documents, because those are living documents, they're dynamic, and they should reflect the thinking of all the group members. So it feels safer to know that it's not in stone, but we can actually contribute to it. That it's a living document, as I was saying, and that speaks to the alignment of group values, which is section 1 of the workbook. And then the facilitator of the working group can make sure to welcome and give new members a chance to introduce themselves, which again speaks to relationship building. And anytime there's a new member, it's helpful to remind everyone that all the ideas can be shared in the conversation, but they can also be shared in the chat, because some people are more comfortable sharing between meetings or in the chat or in a different way. And so they know that there's a place for them to share at any time. And then beyond the working group conversation, new members are supported with formal but also informal mentorship, and they're encouraged to reach out in between meetings, as I was saying, so that they feel empowered with and the familiarity of processes. And again, it's about supporting them in a way that works best for them. And then in this specific example that Carrie shared, being intentional and having a safe conversation in a one-on-one situation with Sam. And as soon as you are recognizing and noticing frustrations, he can be acknowledged by sending a direct chat message to him to say, let's have a conversation beyond this, let's stay online or something like that. So he feels that those frustrations have been noted and there's an opportunity to follow up and explore his concerns. And then beginning any working group with the shared goals, the timelines, and the priorities, or making these documents accessible and visible at all times is really important, because they are central to the planning conversations. And finally, a reminder that the working group has collaboratively made decisions based on contributions and evidence from all the members, always maintains that collective focus forward. So everything has been considered, but we're moving forward collectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Latcha, for such a comprehensive and thoughtful response, pulling from your wisdom, in your current role, but also your previous roles. And I invite others too, if you have ideas for how you might respond to this type of conflict, to put that into the chat. And I do apologize, I forgot to introduce one of the characters in our vignette, and that's Jeanette. And Jeanette is the group facilitator. And like many people, Jeanette, very busy, offered to meet with Harpreet, and Harpreet declined. But Harpreet kind of goes in not really knowing what to expect. And so Latcha very, in a really great way, emphasized it's not only good for Harpreet, but it's good for Jeanette, to really get on the same page and take that time to get to know each other and to understand each other and provide that preparation time. And also Latcha emphasized meeting with Sam to really understand, where he's coming from, where his frustrations are coming from. And so overall, I really like, Latcha, that you really emphasize the relationship building piece, kind of getting ahead of the challenge by doing a lot of thinking before you launch a working group about the different dynamics that may come to play, the pre-conversations that need to happen, so you can, set yourself up for success. Inevitably, even when you put all that work in, there's going to be moments where you're sensing that something's off. Collaboration might be breaking down. And so having those check-ins after the meetings, as Latcha emphasized, is really, really critical. It's hard because it's time, and we're all time deprived, and we're exhausted. So it's hard to build in that time, but it really does pay dividends. And I think Jen in the chat talked about not a code of conduct, but a code of civility. I really like that, and thinking about what is that for your team. And has that been developed amongst all the different stakeholders and partners you're working with in terms of those rules of engagement? So thank you for that suggestion. We're going to move on to part 2 of the case scenario. So we'll see what happens next. So Sam is still in the working group, feeling increasingly frustrated because he kind of feels like, and I mean, we can all relate to this, where the conversation is going in circles and circles and circles. And he just feels that progress is not being made. People are not focusing on the right thing. And sometimes the conversation gets derailed by certain members, and certain members of the team also feels that Sam derails the conversation because they think that he keeps focusing on his own individual experience and he's getting frustrated, and and so people are feeling that the conversation is just not moving forward. So this question, which I know I'm talking a lot in this session already, and we will have a chance to hear from Dawn as well, but I agreed to take on this question, is how do you get a meeting back on track when the agenda is derailed, while ensuring that you're still being supportive of the person contributing? And show of hands, if you've been in a room or at part of a meeting where you feel like someone or certain people are taking up all the airtime. I know that person is me right now. And it's awkward. So when you're a facilitator, you're thinking like, oh boy, like I want to be that person that's open and responsive and creating space, but we're really, really getting stuck. And I was introduced actually by Latcha to this really great YouTuber, and he's so much more than that. He's a global expert and chief experience officer of We and Me. His name's Chad Littlefield, and I have to tell you, totally worth checking out his YouTube clips. And he has this amazing clip on, it's called, and I'll get the link in the chat in a moment, how to deal with people who dominate the conversation. And he very crisply gives a couple of tips on how to redirect conversations. And the first thing he talks about is flipping the roles. So for example, if you're a facilitator, you can say, okay, I'm about to ask a question. But if you're that person that is always kind of the first one to jump in, instead, kind of sit back a bit and be like the fifth or sixth person to jump in. So hold yourself back. We'll get to you in a moment, but let's let other people in the room kind of share first. And then you could, enter that conversation a bit later. So you flip the roles and give other people an opportunity. He also talks about creating productive silence. And so facilitators might say, I'm going to ask a question, but let's take a little pause for maybe 30, 45 seconds before we jump in with a response. And what that allows you to do is people, and I'm one of those people, I need a little bit of time to collect my ideas and thoughts. I admire the people that have those crisp ideas right away. I'm not one of them. So it gives, when you take that intentional pause, the people that want to lean in, they're going to be like, I want to talk, but it gives other people an opportunity to kind of lean in with their ideas as well. Finally, he also talks about changing the mechanics of the group. And so by doing things like splitting into smaller groups, having discussions, reporting back is really effective to get more ideas, and also to kind of level out the power differences a little bit. And he said that, when people are reporting other people's ideas, they're more likely to be succinct when they're reporting kind of their own perspectives and ideas. And so he has a few other tips in there. So I invite people to dig into that. And also I wanted to reflect back before we go to the next part of the vignette, is a really great dialogue that I had with Betty Lou Christie, actually. It was following our session 2 on bearing witness to lived experience. And so if we think about Sam in this vignette, like when he is frustrated and showing emotion, there's a chance that maybe Sam has been triggered, in this conversation. And in session 2, we talked about, if you're in a meeting and someone's triggered, do you then kind of halt the meeting and halt the agenda and let that person share and kind of throw the agenda out the window? That was mentioned during the panel. And we had Betty Lou and I had a really good discussion on that. And I also discussed this with others. Is that the best way forward? And so we had some good reflections that I wanted to share for people's consideration, is that if you do find that they're emotional and getting triggered in that meeting, continuing to share in that meeting space might not be the best thing for that person who's sharing, nor the people in the group. And so if there's an opportunity for someone, say one individual who is maybe partnered with that patient partner as a person, facilitator, or support, to leave the room, virtual or in person, to provide some immediate one-to-one reflection support, kind of pulling them outside of that meeting structure. And then the meeting does continue. However, afterwards, it's important for the group to reflect and to learn and to have that time to, reflect on how they can learn from that dialogue and the emotion that was shared in that meeting. It's hard because there's no right or wrong. You'll have a sense as a facilitator in the room when it's appropriate to kind of pause versus continue on with support in another way. But I just wanted to close the loop on that, because I think it was a really important piece where we're always trying to balance emotionally supporting people in our work, because any one of us could be triggered in a meeting. It's not just a patient or family partner, but also continuing on with the great work that we're doing. So can you do both simultaneously? And that's what we had debated is, can that person be buddied up with someone? They can have one-on-one support, and then the meeting continues and you reflect as a group after as a way to close the loop. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but curious anyone's thoughts in the chat. You can put those reflections in, but we will move on now to the part 3 of the vignette. So the breakup. This is something we don't really talk about in partnerships. Is we talk about having an on-ramp of supporting people to be partners, but we don't talk about the off-ramp. What if people, it's just not a good fit? So Sam continues to leave these meetings feeling disempowered and wonders if he should quit the group. Like he's kind of thinking he's not vibing with the group anymore. And the facilitator's question as well, if it's the best fit for Sam, because his expectations are not totally aligned with the goals of the group, but they don't know how to talk to him and they avoid the conversation. So if we think back to the theory burst, this is the classic, like not collaborating, not assertive, just avoiding. So no one's talking about it, even though something's amiss. And so we're both Latcha and Dawn are going to reflect on this question: is what happens when the relationship isn't working and you feel it's time to break up and end the relationship partnership? Because we often talk about, let's just fix the problem, but sometimes you do have to go your separate ways. So let's dig into that one. So Latcha, did you want to start us off, and then I'll hand it over to Dawn?
Sure, absolutely. So I wanted to say there's some great thinking that's being left in the chat as well. So thank you to everyone for doing that as well. And with respect to the breakup, so I think ensuring that there's a PFC partner, like a co-chair, and that Jen had mentioned in the chat too, like an ambassador who welcomes new members. But with all of that, it's about a pathway of open communication that needs to be there within the OHT. It could be staff, like I said, could be ambassador, a volunteer PFC partner, available to speak with Sam about his concerns. And you can be really intentional about who might be that person that would work best with Sam's situation. So be thoughtful about that as well. And in those conversations, you would be helping him to know that his thinking has been captured in some way. And you're reiterating the process of the working group, that's really important, that we go back there to how we function together, and that the response with him is timely, really, really important. And I think always beginning with a personalized appreciation for Sam's contributions, not a blanket, speak to how that person and what they have added. That's really important for making people feel valued, and that it's personalized. And then together, whoever that person is with Sam, and it could even be 2 people with Sam, acknowledging where Sam feels his strengths and experience and ideas could best be aligned, and exploring the open possibilities that are there across this partnership work. And I can even speak to, for example, communities of practice and projects that are out there. And there may be other places. These are all important in this work. All of this is important. And then it's important to acknowledge that this can be challenging and complex work, and just naming it can feel uncomfortable. And that there are many places where each PFC partner can feel heard, feel like they have something to add a value, especially at different times in this work too, because it keeps shifting and changing. It might be just the right time to join into a project, and that they can thrive in their role. But if you leave it unattended, and this is what Carrie was speaking to, Sam is going to feel that sense of frustration rising, and it can feel like wanting to compete for to be noticed and acknowledged. And if I draw a correlation or a connection with the workbook, that's in number 6 of section 2, the conflict styles. But that's, yeah, I just wanted to add that. And I want to go back to what Jen added about the code of civility. What a beautiful way to talk about, again, those norms, the way that we want to be together, and that people feel that they have ownership of all of that. This is complex work. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Latcha. And I'm going to hand it over now to Dawn for her reflections on this.
Thanks a lot, Carrie, and thanks, Latcha. And it's really my privilege to be with all of you today to hopefully share some of my experiences. I'm a classic avoider. I'll just put it right out there. Conflict is just the worst scenario in the world for me, but I recognize it is part of my job. That being said, my goal in facilitating engagements is to prevent these types of situations. So for me, a big part of this is when I reflect on this scenario, I think to myself, how could this potentially have been prevented? And it may not be totally preventable. And I think that is really important to recognize. We don't talk about the breakup. I've never talked about it in any other kind of session. So I think it's really important that we are talking about it today, because a lot of patient partners who I work with don't even think leaving is an option. They really feel like I've been invited here. I've been privileged to be invited here. And if it doesn't work out with me, maybe this group isn't going to work with others like me. So we put a lot of pressure, unfortunately, on individuals sometimes to stay in it for the long game. So being a preventer, I think I want to pull from a number of things that both Carrie and Lache have contributed, that setting up either the norms or the code of civility can really be helpful here. And one of the things I can share with you when I set up engagements from the very start is to be really open and transparent with people, that if they feel for any reason that the engagement isn't working for them, whether it's life, whether it's health, whether they just don't feel like they're vibing well, it's okay to step back. It's okay to take a break, or it's okay to say, you know, this just isn't working for me. I'm going to remove myself from this. It can be awkward to have that conversation when you first bring people together. But for me, it's part of being transparent, and it's part of actually creating a safe space where people can feel like if it really doesn't work out for them, they can go. On the flip side, when I set up that conversation, I also share with people that if for some reason the organization or the team that's hosting the initiative feels like it's not working out and there's not a fit, they might ask the person to leave. And so, you know, it's a two-way thing where the fit has to work. And again, I'm not trying to be the downer in the conversation, and I set it up to say, you know, it's not the expectation that you're going to leave, but it is okay. And it is important to recognize that not all engagements work, not all teams work. So I think I'll leave it with that. I try as much as I can to prevent. I have been in scenarios where a patient partner has left, and they've given us reasons, which is okay. We've reflected on those, and we continue to work in other ways with that patient partner. And then I've been in situations where we've had to ask patient partners to leave, situations where they've made scenarios unsafe for other patient partners, and we recognize that. So I just wanted to share that because I just feel like we don't talk about this scenario. And I think it's okay if things don't work out, and we can hopefully find ways to learn from those scenarios.
Thank you, Dawn. And there's really good dialogue happening in the chat. And I agree. I had a quick look at what Michael had mentioned. And it's important that the patient doesn't feel like it's their fault. There's learning for everyone. It takes many people, to build a relationship, and it's about the fit. And it's an opportunity to learn, like, why didn't it work? Why are there other conditions that would support this working better, or other types of groups or activities that would be a better fit? One question that I ask myself often, and this might work for you as well, when I'm asked to join something, whatever it is, the two questions I ask myself, and this helps me decide if I'm going to join, is, do I feel that I add value? And also, do I actually feel valued by people in the group? Do I feel like they want to hear my point of view? Do I feel like I'm helping? Do I feel, so there has to be, these two things need to be happening. And if not, I leave feeling like Sam, like a bit frustrated, like I'm kind of spinning my wheels and frustrated, and no ill will, maybe just not the right group for me because we're all busy. So I think it's a couple of things, it's a couple of questions that might help as you also decide, because also patient partners and caregiver partners are feeling inundated, and many people on this call right now are probably feeling like, oh my gosh, like I get asked to do so many things. And to be really selective and to ask yourself, do I bring value? Do I feel valued? And that could help you decide whether or not it's the right fit. Even if it's great people in the group and you get along with them, it might not be the right thing for you. But, to reflect other comments in the chat, these breakups are hard. We feel like we have failed or didn't live up to what we thought we could, but it's a learning opportunity. And sometimes it's best to cut our losses, and move on, whether we're a clinician in the group, the facilitator, a leader, a community partner, a patient or family partner. Any one of us could feel that we have to cut our losses at some point because it's just not working. And I don't think we agree with Dawn that we don't talk about that enough. Moving to the last part of the vignette, where Dawn has done a lot of research in this area around value. And so now we're going to go back to Harpreet. So Harpreet has been kind of working her way into the group, getting more familiar. But she is starting to wonder, like, what value she adds to the group. And she's not really getting much of a response from people when she does talk. She's losing a bit of confidence. But also other group members don't want to put her on the spot, so they don't necessarily direct questions to her either. And she's really unsure about her role. She questions why she's there. She's not feeling confident, and she's just wondering, like, what value she brings. And so to Dawn, how do you have a conversation about your role with the team? So someone like Harpreet, how does she broach this conversation? And how can we help patient and family partners feel valued? What are the different things we can do? So I invite you to respond to this.
Thanks, Carrie. And I'm just noting there's lots of great conversation in the chat. So I really appreciate people adding to the conversation. I always learn a lot from these. So in terms of questioning value, I think, as someone who helps with these types of engagements, one of the things that I like to do, so if I were Jeanette, what I would do is I would check in fairly regularly with both Harpreet and Sam to see how things are going. Then you're not putting them on the spot per se in terms of calling them out during an engagement. It's more of keeping an open door so that if either of them feel like they would like to have a conversation, and hopefully they can have an open and safe conversation, knowing that, you're not going to take back things to the team. But that's one way that I found that kind of decreases the pressure on patient partners and others on the team to have to self-identify that they're having issues, right? So the other thing too is during engagements, if it's Jeanette leading the engagement or another chair, I think it's really important to recognize, when someone hasn't had the ability to speak up in a meeting or to type in the chat. And I think I wanted to pull from something that Lache said earlier too, is that especially in this virtual world, I know lots of people who would rather leave their cameras off and do a lot of typing in a chat versus contributing verbally to conversations. Part of it depends on who they are and what their situation is. But I think it's really important to recognize that different people like to work in different ways. And so to encourage that and to note with them that there are different ways that they can contribute. And maybe it's not always at the group meetings either. Maybe it's a check-in after a group meeting. Maybe Harpreet feels more comfortable and it will help build her confidence in terms of being reinforced that the points that she's bringing up are valid and are valued to the team. Another thing I wanted to bring up is, again, something that's been talked about before in terms of being really clear in communications about roles and expectations associated with someone being part of the initiative. I'm a big believer in co-creating terms of reference with the whole group around what the engagement looks like, and making sure, especially for patient partners, that they're comfortable with that they understand it. Do they have questions about it? Is, if their life or health situation changes, we can always come back to what their role looks like. So I think if you have things papered, and I'm not saying this because, you're trying to cover yourself, but I think it is some place and something that people can go back to and think, is it just me, or am I really understanding what the role is? Can the role change as well as Harpreet maybe does become more confident in what's happening? So those are a few things that I've written down. I didn't want questioning value to be about one of my topics that I've done a lot of work in, which is compensation for patient partners. But I'll be honest with you, if Harpreet feels that having her time compensated is something that, partway through the initiative, she or Sam feel like might be of value to them, I think if the team is open to having that conversation, and it's okay to be honest about maybe there aren't resources to compensate patient partners, or maybe there is an opportunity. In my world, you can apply for research grants. So maybe there's an opportunity to apply for a grant and you can build in a budget for those types of kind of recognition or ways to acknowledge people who are on the team. So again, I think a lot of this is being flexible in your approach. There's, understanding how Harpreet might best contribute to the team, or best be engaged, best be shown the value that she's bringing. And in her case, it might be lots of also feedback in terms of how what she has shared with the group has changed the direction or the initiative or the thinking of the team as well. So I think those are a few things I'll put out, Carrie. I'm happy if you and Lache also have some comments too, but I'll just put those out. I know, this is tough. It's not a big, nice wrapped up with a bow kind of response. I think there's a lot of creativity and flexibility that people have to bring to the table here.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and thank you so much, Lacha, for this amazing discussion and the opportunity to dig into some questions that we often don't dig into related to the challenges that we might experience with partnership. So the good news is that we do have some time to dig in together in breakout rooms. So Junie, you could advance the slide. And so what we've done is we have 4 breaks, so she'll get the slides back up, but 4 breakout rooms. Each breakout room has a facilitator that's been pre-assigned, so one of the speakers from today, in addition to a note taker who's going to try to kind of distill the discussion into 3 crisp points. Always hard to do. And each breakout room has one of the challenges that we talked about today is going to be the one that you dig into as a group to share without naming names or organizations, just kind of keeping it kind of general, but sharing maybe any experiences you've had with that challenge and ways that you've addressed that challenge. We are kind of getting tight on time, so I'm going to suggest that we spend 10 minutes in the breakout room and then come back for a quick little report back. So we'll have 4 people reporting back the 3 very succinct, it will have to be very succinct points of what stood out in the breakout room. And so it will take just a little bit of maneuvering because we have to make sure that the facilitator and note taker get assigned to the right room. So there's going to be just a little bit of a delay as we kind of disperse into our breakout rooms to dig into the challenge. So thank you again. And thank you, Junie and Michelle, who are doing a lot of work in the background getting us set up, and to Michelle Sparling and Rivka Eisenstadt and Aria Burrs for helping to take notes in the session. And Lacha, myself, and Dawn and Michelle Marcineau will be facilitating the breakout rooms. So as you're getting sorted into breakout rooms, start to think about, maybe one of the challenges that really stood out for you today, and if you had relatable experiences to that. And Junie, let us know if you need any. Perfect. And then breakout room 3. Okay, so you should be getting assigned at this point. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're down to the wire as usual. We had a great discussion in my room. So Junie, you can stop sharing the screen. And what we're going to do quickly is we're going to have a chance to hear from each. We have a few minutes, so this is very rapid fire. So we had a recorder in each of the 4 rooms, trying to distill down the key points of the discussion. And I don't expect you to comprehensively address everything. Maybe just pick a few points that stood out to report back. So I'm first going to call out to breakout room number 1, which I'm trying to jog my memory Michelle. Thank you, Michelle Sparling. Over to you.
No problem. I mean, just quickly, the key points. One is really about the getting to know each other from a very base level at the beginning, really build that foundation of who you are, your why, that you're coming, what's behind it, to really create that foundation, to build up and move forward, and really do it from a position of mutual respect and from empathy, really taking the time to understand each other there and having that welcome piece on it. One of the things that came up is having follow-ups with people, how critical that was, especially if somebody's showing any frustrations, really individualizing the needs for people. There was the piece in terms of, one group talked about they're all business and, they have some fun, but they're trying to get together the person to really create that, other dynamic there, but being very focused and being very matter of fact has helped them and where they need to go. The other piece is having the pathways of communications is so critical, important to clarify the directions, the roles and responsibilities is really wrapping around. And then finally, the getting together in a face-to-face, connecting in person to build upon each other and having ongoing efforts to really maintain that was such a critical piece in this. But it really was giving the time and space to know where people are, to sense who they are, and to really respond to them in a way that works for them. Did I miss anything for my team?
Michelle, that was amazing. There's so much goodness in what you just shared, and I'm so glad we have it recorded because I want to go back and kind of ruminate on it a bit more. Group number 2, was that me? Oh, that was Michelle's room. So that Rivka, over to you.
Okay, there were really, really good discussion. I think the most important point that came out was that a safe space needs to be created and led by a trained facilitator, someone who knows what they're doing. Another point was that there should be a code of conduct or civility or whatever you want to call it, that everyone understands so that it is a safe space for the group. In the interview and orientation, just even bringing in people to the group, there should be clear roles, goals, the process, so people know why they're there. Betty Lou had a great thing. This was about the derailing, but wait. Why am I talking? So that people, when they're, speaking, they have a sense of their purpose and the goal and their role in the group. And then finally, when the conversation appears, when someone is going on or derailing in the minds of some, that the facilitator or a mentor or a coach offers to either take the conversation offline and discuss it further, or maybe bring the conversation back at a more appropriate time when it's more relevant to discussion on the agenda. So those were our points about derailing.
Excellent. Thank you, Rivka. Lots of goodness in that report back. Over to Aria now for the group that I was in. Which was a really
Okay.
good discussion.
Our discussion was around breakups. And number one key point was probably that we need to recognize that there's a lot of different contexts that these groups take place in, and organizations have a lot of work to do beforehand to ensure that they're creating safe contexts, and they need to invest the resources in order to make sure that all members feel valued and welcome. The second would be that when you are establishing groups, you need to try and find the right role for the right people. And then when there are breakups that need to happen, you need to have the difficult conversations about fit and perhaps discuss other possibilities for those individuals. And then the third one would be that perhaps it's best to have an ambassador who is very skilled in dealing with these confrontations, who can always be looked to help and support difficult conversations and breakups, perhaps a neutral role for this person who is very good at managing these tensions.
Amazing, so succinct, and you hit really like the heart of the discussion I found. So thank you. Hopefully the rest of the group agrees, but it was excellent. And over finally, last but not least, and apologies for going a bit over, but Bianca, over to you.
Sure, I'll try and wrap it up really quickly. Our group had lots of great conversation about how we can support, how patient caregiver partners can be supported to feel more valued and more safe and comfortable in their roles. And so some key points, and please jump in, anybody in the chat if I missed anything, were really about that role of an ambassador or liaison to support patient caregiver partners, sets everybody up very well for important and difficult conversations moving through the work. The role of intentional listening or checking in to understanding the experience and the opportunities for improvement when folks are involved. So really doing that through surveys or regular check-ins before or after sessions to make sure people are well set up. There was some rich conversation about existing relationships and how that can impact people's comfort or value within the larger group. So understanding that the table is made up of a number of people who have all known each other for a long time, that can really impact how people feel like they can contribute or the value that they bring to that existing group dynamic. And so being cognizant of that and then working to perhaps shift or build other relationships. I'm sure I missed a lot of it, but is there anything else on? Or other group members?
I think maybe the only other thing is that we had a lot of conversation about everyone's learning it together and being really open and honest about that, and learning from people's experiences and then building that in to better the engagement. So great job, Bianca and group 4. And I just wanted to add that in too.
Amazing, Dawn. Amazing, Bianca. Huge thank you for everyone who we all curated the content today. And I'm just so grateful for everyone's participation in the breakout rooms, in the chat. I apologize if we didn't get to your questions. I'm always available to email if you want to follow up or debrief. I know we're over time, but those who are able to stick around for a couple of minutes, we will throw up a quick Mentimeter. No pressure to stay. I know people are busy. I do have to work on my timekeeping skills. I haven't nailed it quite yet. But if you want to go to Menti, www.menti.com, type in the code 8979-2267 and maybe quickly add what stood out for you as most helpful in today's session. So again, Mentimeter is a tool you could use with your teams to generate some anonymous discussion on whatever topics you're digging into. So good frameworks to resolve tensions, importance of trained facilitators, asking, am I being valued? Do I add value? weight, why am I talking, including a code of conduct, rules of engagement, the code concept to help us become adaptive leaders, honest conversations. This is great. Ensure your facilitator is skilled. Exactly. It's a really big role in terms of there's a lot of things happening at once when you're a facilitator and trying to be in tune in terms of the preparation and the actual conduct of the meeting. Talking about breakups, it's a reality in all relationships. Exactly. OHT is not exempt. So lots of crossover of learning. The importance of creating safe space and defined roles. Do not rush to onboard new members. Panel topics to create safe, productive spaces, honest conversations, code of conduct or code of civility, which we talked about today. Okay, so you can keep those responses coming. We will switch over to the next mentee question so people can respond to that. What would you like to learn more about, particularly as it relates to leaning into the challenges? Onboarding. Yeah, we'll get a bit into this in our next session on preparing for co-design. We'll get into some onboarding tips and strategies. Yeah, on orientation onboarding in a meaningful way. That's critical. And there's also an opportunity to fill out a survey after to answer these questions. Facilitation, professional learning opportunities for, patient and family caregiver members. So exactly, the training and the opportunities to gain skills in facilitation and other things, and training for facilitators. Yes, thank you, Alex. Okay, so we'll keep those responses coming, and then we'll go to the final mentee question. This is a tricky one, but concrete example of how you will use this work in your OHT related activities. If you can think of something there. And something that you just might want to think about with your teams going forward, of how you might apply this work, the learnings, any of the materials. Ask questions if not understood. Yeah. Using the weight concept. Create and apply the code of civility. Yeah, so it's asking questions, but I agree there's more to it and what we need to do to create the spaces to prepare how to bring up and respond to tensions and work together. Ooh, I have a creative think there's a whiteboard thing happening. Technology always surprises me. Mentorship for new members. Ensure a clearly defined role for all members, and maybe revisiting over time, debriefing, solving, see the mystery whiteboard. Thank you, Irene, and thank you, everyone. I think we are about 10 minutes over, so what we'll do is Junie, you can stop sharing. I just want to quickly say thank you. Please join us for our next session on preparing for co-design. I think if someone wants to pop the registration link in the chat. So we have 3 more sessions left. But I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone for participating today, but also many people involved are here today who are involved in creating the full series. And it was a year-long process of patient family partners, clinicians, leaders, trainees, researchers, and others who came together to develop, kind of to think through what the content should be, how we should tackle the content, and present it in a way that would be helpful to help people move forward. And, you know, we're never going to get it completely right. We have lots of learning to do. And so I really welcome people to let us know, like, what landed well, where can we do better. But really want to thank our panelists today, so Latcha Hives and Don Richards, for really digging into the content with us today, to Rivka Eisenstadt and Michelle Sparling and Bianca and Michelle and Aria for note-taking and so succinctly sharing back the findings in ways that wow, like, I want to learn how to do that well, because, you know, going on and on is, it's hard to be succinct when you have such great discussions. So thank you to everyone that helped today. And I see Eshrat has a question.
Yeah. Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for explaining everything, you know, clear. And I have one question. I couldn't catch up the link. Are you going to share the link in the email? Going to send us as an email to register ourselves for our next session?
Absolutely. So we'll put a link to the next session that you can register for in the follow-up email. So we'll do that as well. So thank you for
having
that, and thank you for participating today.
It was
So yeah, so in true Carrie fashion, we're 12 minutes over. So thank you, everyone, and please, like, email anytime with ideas and questions. Let us know what's landing, you know, and what's not, and then we'll work together going forward. So, and big thanks to Michelle Marcineau and Junie Bake, who are in the background but doing all of the maneuvering and supporting and building. So thank you. And I'm sure I forgot others as well. So always trying to remember, because there's so many people that are involved in this work. So thank you very much. That closes our session, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye.